Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news. Today is Monday, December 8th, 2025. We only have a few more weeks of saying 2025. Yep. We'll scroll down the SteamDB 24-hour peak concurrent chart as we do some warm-up for about an hour, then we'll jump into the video game news. I'm starting later today, so really I may not warm up that much. But yeah. Over the weekend, I mostly played Balatro, and I am getting a lot better at just like cleaning and decluttering. Unfortunately, I also am noticing that just to do anything on my computer now, I need the glasses, and it is just rapid eyesight decline, and my eyesight's not even getting, it's probably getting worse as far as the near side too. I'm not to the point where I need glasses for that, but yeah, just looking at my screen on my phone is sometimes a little blurry, and I'm feeling eye pain, and yeah, I am hoping that I can quote Kindergarten Cop and say it's not a tumor, but yeah. I'm also hoping it's not just wildly diabetes, wildly uncared for diabetes. Yeah. So yeah, there's a hassle certainly there, in that things are getting worse. You should probably try and see a doctor. Over the weekend too, yeah. How did I start this? Yeah, playing a lot of Balatro, unlocking a few more things, but I really am just getting painted into this corner where I really only have a couple more jokers to unlock and a couple more vouchers to unlock, and then there's some challenges, which I really don't like the challenges, and then there's just trying to win. Like the first 60 hours of a game of Balatro, starting from the beginning, for me has just been trying to unlock everything. There's easily another 180 hours of playing to try and get top difficulty wins for all of the different jokers, with it seemingly being you'll just get an achievement if you do that. And yeah, I don't think getting the orange stake difficulty, which I think is the highest stake difficulty, it might be gold stake actually, either way, I don't think getting those wins and getting stickers for every joker used in those runs that you won at that highest difficulty does anything for you, when it really should. It should be a lot more like Rogue Legacy, where you're making bits of progress more than just unlocking new items and jokers. Overall, I can say I really don't like Balatro as much as it seems most gamers did or do. And I can't help but to think that a lot of the reason why people are still playing it is that they're just trying to grind out the victories, which there's just way too much grind in it. The game does not really cheat in your favor and help you win. It doesn't have any pity timers. It would be a much better game if they updated it and added another 150 jokers that were a little bit wilder and crazier as to how they modified poker. Otherwise, you are just playing what is often a 5-card draw, a card draw style poker. And yeah, it's just nowhere as varied and good and nowhere as mature as something like Binding of Isaac is, which is a much older game, certainly, but even in the initial launch of Binding of Isaac, there was a lot more items. The challenges gave you something for beating them, and it was much more strategy based, so you would get better with every victory, whereas, or every failure even, you'd get better at Binding of Isaac. But in Balatro, when you lose, you mostly are just realizing that you had a bad run of luck, and that was it. If you can hear me rubbing my plastic cup here, it's got grip dots on it, and I thought that might be Braille, and then one side it says solo because it's, I guess, a solo cup. Let's get rid of that plastic cup so it makes less noise in my hand. So yeah, I'm not really loving it. I didn't do as much tweaking as I wanted to. I did fix SteamDB, for instance, so now it is no longer using uBlock Origin. It is all Violent Monkey scripts, although there is something here I should probably tweak to get rid of this green, because it really just doesn't matter that this game is in my library personally when I'm showing off the charts. But I also can't log out of SteamDB, because if I do, then I won't get the information when I see a Steam page. I got the several other little tweaks done for several other pages. Went in here and actually let's unclose that, and yeah, you can see how it looks originally, and then after it's done loading, the Violent Monkey script is told to wait until it's done loading to change how things look. But yeah, I went in here and adjusted the most wishlisted games on Steam, which is also a SteamDB page, on this table. And in this case, I did take out things that are on my wish list, which I'm not sure what would be on my wish list. Why am I... Oh yeah, I'm following it, not unfollowing it. I thought I was unfollowing it for a second there. But yeah, usually you change the colors here. Doesn't really matter. Although, there is perhaps an argument to put some margin on the sides, but I don't want to get too deep into that either. Because again, still waiting for vertical streaming to really be a thing on YouTube, for me at least. I haven't seen anyone else do it either, so except for the one person that's doing it using Streamlabs that I know of. Yeah, so I suspect YouTube hasn't really rolled that out. Speaking of software, streaming software, someone commented on one of my videos. I guess I mentioned OBS, and they said they didn't like OBS for the most part. I'm paraphrasing here. And then I said I couldn't do what I do without it. And then they said, try Bandicam, it works sometimes for the most part. Again, I'm paraphrasing, which, yeah, I don't know if that was just a piffy joking conversation or what, but suffice it to say, I will not be moving away from OBS. If I was going to move away from OBS, it would have to be something open source and more mature that somehow I just hadn't heard about, or at least more adopted. Suppose if there was some new streaming software that was open source and way more liked and had a lot more support, that would be something, but I just don't think that's likely to happen. Particularly the experimental programming nature of how I like to do things would smack in the face of most other softwares. And what people generally complain about OBS is that it is not in some kind of dumbed down mode where a bunch of features are either missing or hidden, which they have tried to address that with fresh installs. In particular, asking people, do you want the dumbed down interface or do you want to see more options? VLC has a whole thing about that too, and Kodi, K-O-D-I, also has a thing about that too, where you go into settings and there's simple, normal, advanced, and expert, and just they've categorized settings under different categories to hide things that just don't matter. I suppose I missed something here, that there is a gap. Let's see. Let's inspect this element. Yeah, there is a gap here that I missed. Yeah. So I need to work on that. That usually happens when there is hard coding of the height of certain parts of the HTML. Speaking of HTML, HTML5 is way different than HTML2 or 3 that I was taught in school. Like, it's practically just a new language that uses a lot of the same terminology of the old language. But it's heavy influence on tagging everything as a div instead of as some other tag, and it's heavy influence on CSS to make things not only have different types of appearances but also to be labeled because they have a certain class labeled in there. Makes it trivial nowadays to add a number sign and then type in the ID and maybe even the class of a div object. And when you do that, you will immediately take that URL and link down to that part of the page. Where in the old days, you would have to anchor every single tag. You'd have to type in the word anchor equals and then some flag word, and then you would, I think, have the same terminology of a number sign on the URL in a link. So then it would be a href link equals the URL for that page with a number sign at the end in that tag, and then you complete the rest of the hyperlink tag, the A tag. Notice they expected the internet to have so many hyperlinks per page that they chose just the letter A for the tag to save bandwidth. Whereas nowadays that's not really a consideration, so it's now div is much more frequent. There's probably less compression also going through web page downloads. Linus Tech Tips did a weird, I assume it's a holiday filler episode, where they tried to access the internet with a 56K modem, and yeah, it was impossible, basically. Not only painfully slow, but very often just completely impossible because websites have so much going on with them, even in the JavaScript and text, let alone pictures and video. that servers will time out before you could download an entire page with all of its JavaScripts and CSS files also downloading. Plus I had to jump through ridiculously crazy setups to even have a browser that wasn't going to try and use a ton of data. Also, they still do make 56K modems, but they're mostly being put in servers or fax machines or copy machines, things like that, that are sending tiny small amounts of data, often to remote locations that only have phone lines. And even in those cases, a remote location that has a phone line is probably very quickly getting converted into a backbone that is Ethernet based or fiber based. So yeah. But yeah, that was one of the things I was trying to learn, is how can I potentially find an element in JavaScript like this Nevermind link, and then put a link at the top of the page that would jump down to the Nevermind link. And I was able to pull that off. Yeah. This gap at the bottom also could probably be addressed. Every time there's going to be a stream for the next few weeks, I'm going to find little things to tweak, and every now and then I'll find little things to tweak. Now inherently, this doesn't get me as close to my goal of getting away from UI Vision, because I'm probably going to want to take 6 months or longer before I even try to think about converting my scheduling macro that schedules video on YouTube to pure JavaScript. I'm not sure it can be done at all, and even if it could be done, I don't know if YouTube would really work, or if it would tweak something and immediately break. I'm having problems right now just uploading the thumbnails for Fallout New Vegas, which is still airing on my channel. There is definitely a thought that maybe I should put Balatro out early, right after Fallout New Vegas, and see if that gets me a few more views. Yeah, it would be nice if next year was the year I finally got back in the YouTube Partner Program. But yeah, there is a issue, certainly, with that, in that I've completely lost my train of thought in the middle of that sentence. What was I even talking about? Oh yeah, there's an issue with YouTube in that it seems like it says it is updated and everything is done, and then if you don't sit there a few more minutes and let it really process in the background, the YouTube Studio just will not really save the upload on the thumbnails, and it will just revert back to the old ones. And so I'm having to do it in smaller batches and kind of reload frequently to just make sure the videos work. At least that's my issue, I think. For all I know, I'm going to go back and look at it today and find out what I did yesterday is all gone. Which, if that's the case, I don't know what the deal is, but yeah, I'm not particularly happy with that experience. No offense to Zig, who created the thumbnails, Yeah, Zig is working hard on his new game, which has drastically changed from the initial game jam requirements that were kind of hoisted on him. And I definitely think it's going in the right direction to stand out more. It's getting away a lot from the farming element, which was forced on him, and is now seemingly going more towards being a RPG game where you're going to a almost Hogwarts style college, where there's fantastical creatures going to college there, and it almost feels like it might be a card game. I'm not sure he's locked down the gameplay mechanic or not, but yeah, you somehow take degrees and pass degrees and get some kind of bonuses for passing the degrees. It is artistically falling in line to, it's still I think is being made in Game Maker, the makers of RPG Maker, so I don't know how much that engine can really have you drastically change the appearance, but I do feel like he's locking down into a style that will be of his own. So it's going to be really hard effectively growing up with the game, or watching the game grow up, to know if I really looked at it for 5 seconds like I looked at any other Steam game, would I dismiss it as an RPG Maker looking game or not. When we at the moment I wouldn't really be able to be certain I could honestly say, but he is going in the right direction, and if he continues to go in the right direction visually, that eating with the eyes first aspect of looking at it will certainly have a better outcome, in my opinion. I don't know if he's going to be done anytime soon. He probably isn't. He did put on his Discord that he's been sick lately, and I feel like that's a thing where he's probably being too deferring to an audience and the consumer, when like it's really not the consumer's business. If you've been sick, you really don't have to apologize for taking your time to develop a game. You don't want to set yourself up with extra pressure and extra expectations that you feel like the audience deserves updates in any kind of manner, let alone timely manners. Most people know it takes a long time to make a game, and those people that refuse to realize that are being willfully ignorant. So yeah, I don't think he needs to apologize for being sick. I don't think he needs to feel extra pressure to put out updates. Inherently, the more you talk about a project in general, the more you get that dopamine hit of feeling good, and the less you actually finish of projects. So the suggestion is very often, and you can't really do this in game development, but you can try to do it more often, is to say nothing and do things in secret. Because yeah, telling people about it feels like you just actually did it. I certainly have talked about many projects and then not been capable of actually finishing the projects in many cases. Although in fairness, ones I don't talk about also tend not to get finished, and that's just the nature of people, is that a lot of what you think about doing you don't do, or want to do you don't manage to do. Is there anything else to really say? Black Friday, Cyber Monday was terrible, and yet I still had a list of things I had been planning on buying anyway, so I spent $500 around there. And I thought I was pretty much done for the year. And while the bank won't agree with me on this point, I did end up spending another $400, I think yesterday or the day before, buying 3 under the sofa low profile subwoofers from Monoprice. There's a slick deals for them. They're about $120 each, which you can certainly spend a lot more on speakers and subwoofers than that. And these are things I've been needing. Subwoofers. I have a whole bunch of surround sounds. I used to have tons of surround sound systems for basically every room, and I never really had as many subwoofers as I did surround sounds systems. And now 7.2, 9.2, 10.2, 11.2 surround sound setups are a thing. The 0.2 in those setups refer to the number of subwoofers. A 0.1 would be one subwoofer that you would typically put on the left or right side in the front of a room, left or right of the TV. A 0.2 implies you would typically put one subwoofer in the front, ideally in the front center, but that often is not really doable, and then one in the back. So there could be subwoofer sounds in front of you or behind you if you're in the middle of the room, in the middle of the sound stage, listening. And subwoofers don't inherently have to be that good quality. It's nice if they're really good quality, but if they have anywhere between 18 hertz to 22 hertz on the low side frequency response, and up to honestly, if you're going up to more than 200 hertz on a subwoofer, you're probably doing it wrong as far as low frequencies go. And it's going to very much fall into personal opinions. So the plan in my theater room, I suppose, is to put 2 of those 3 subwoofers there, one under the TV, and we'll see if that works or not, and one under a sofa in the back of the TV room. Then I have a third one, which you could only buy 3 on Amazon. I could probably place another order and bought more. Then I have another one that might very well do well to be under a bed frame in my smallest bedroom, although it's questionable whether I should set up a surround sound system in that room to begin with. I definitely think if I am going to do that, I'm probably going to want to do it as a temporary thing and not try to mount my smallest set of speakers, which I do have too many surround sound speakers. I really wish I could kind of sell some of this stuff and recoup what money I wasted in my misspent youth, but honestly, I don't think it would really sell. People don't have money, nor do people really care too much about surround sounds enough. I'm more likely to give it away as gifts than I am to practically sell it. Let's move that over there. So yeah, I tweaked the chart here also for the November gacha sales. Still playing Pokemon TCG. I think there probably is some room for improvement here. Some of these are pictures, so it might be impossible to get like this rounded part to go away. I'd like to tweak that away and I should probably give some thought to the muted gray color here, whether I would prefer it just to be bright white, or maybe the muted gray works better. Obviously my tweaks aren't 100% perfect. As you can see, this rounded corner here and here is also getting an overlapping line, but it's overall more than acceptable. I'm playing Pokemon TCG Pocket, getting just again close to having everything new unlocked in it. It has a free-to-play player. Yeah. Certainly occurs to me that if I was to hand that account to even a big Pokemon fan, I don't know how much fun they'd really have with it. Just opening packs and maintaining packs. It's a pretty dull game. Obviously, I'm not engaging with the actual gameplay in it of playing the pocket version of Pokemon. But if you already have everything unlocked, you're going to have less reason to really want to play. And if you started fresh with a new account, you're going to really hate it because there's going to be so many cards, probably around 10,000 cards at this point, that you would have to catch up on if you wanted to own them all, and it's just not likely going to actually happen. Still playing Memento Mori. They've got a Christmas type thing going. Pokemon TCG Pocket does have like one decorative background that has Pokemon near a Christmas tree, but it definitely is not going hard into Christmas. Memento Mori has more winter themed visuals and characters, but they make them winter themed less than specifically Christmas. So even in the middle of summer, they are just a character that is in a wintry environment instead of looking oddly Christmas. Which I guess that is part of the thought that Pokemon is also going by, is that you kind of look at these characters year round, and a lot of people are not going to be super happy to have Pikachu in a Christmas hat in the middle of April. Yeah, and I'm still doing Magica Modica, although I don't really know why. Just haven't broken myself for that. I have broken myself, at least at the moment, down of doing any of the cracking the cryptic Sudokus. I might jump back into that, but at the moment I've managed to not do any of those Sudokus for several weeks now, and that has recouped many hours of gameplay. Balatro is probably taking up almost all of that time, but I was spending way too much time playing Cracking the Cryptics and really not gaining anything from it. Not getting better really at Sudoku, and also not making any content or accomplishing anything. We can see that Magica, Magi, etc. here has fallen down by an estimated half of what it got the month previous, and fallen down 28 spots. And they made it to their 1-year anniversary, I think, but I seriously doubt they're going to make it to a 2nd-year anniversary. Which there is more and more of that going on in general, as far as gacha games and mobile games failing. And we may be, in just a few years, on the verge of seeing a complete revolution as far as what games are even the big money makers or the big sellers on mobile, if Steam really is capable of bringing a storefront to mobile, and the Epic Games Store comes to mobile, and probably some other things. Although Brown Dust 2 is one to talk about here, because let's see what's going to happen with me clicking on that. Apparently nothing. Well, let's just talk about brown dust too. I probably broke the page by messing with it. Apparently brown dust 2 was working on being released on Steam. Now brown dust as a gacha game sells itself and has been described as having a bunch of lewd images and scenes, although I suspect it very much is lewd, not nude, because it is allowed on the Android storefront. It, however, has been denied access on Steam. So, it apparently was trying to come to Steam and has been banned, which we're starting to see that pattern happen more, and perhaps the pattern has always been happening, and it's just that it gets underreported until you have somebody like the makers of the game Horses come out and whine about it. And I guess that might be the best contribution that Horses could do for the gaming community at the moment, is whine about being banned on Steam. Now I say whine in particular to the Horses situation, and because apparently I got some more information, and assuming this is true from this one YouTuber who described the situation, the maker of Horses were asked to submit a build of the game 2 years ago to Steam, and that is not unheard of when a game is tagged as having more mature content. In that build, they had a scene where apparently a father takes a young underage girl and she rides on the back of one of the humans with a horse head creatures, as we've seen them in the trailer. Apparently all the blurring in that game is not just for the trailer, by the way. It does feel like they're trying to make an argument that if you treated humans like you treated horses, would you feel the same? But also, more information really comes in that they took a $100,000 loan to build this game. That looks like it probably wouldn't really take $100,000 to make a game like that, and you would never really greenlight the development of a game like Horses based on its trailer in the first place for any amount of money. So they've known for 2 years that they effectively weren't going to be allowed on Steam, and they sure may have gotten surprise banned from the Epic Games Store, but they already knew they were doomed when they got rejected, because specifically they were rejected in a way that Steam said we won't accept any further submissions. There is either one individual or a group of people, very possibly a group of people, and for all we know it might be a group of people led by Valve's Gabe Newell himself, that have different interpretations of the law and just a different desire as far as any scenes that group of people might see as sexualized or involving any kind of sexual activity and minors. And when they see that, and when they get on that high horse, I guess no pun intended, but I made one anyways, they will not take any further submissions because they just don't want to look at it and they just don't want to deal with it. They don't want to be pressed on this issue or define any yes, no lines in the sand. They just want to say this game effectively pissed us off and it is just banned forever. Now, I don't know at that point 2 years ago when they were banned why they didn't decide to make a completely different game by a completely different name that looked completely different, instead of doubling down on it. Which does bring me back to my tinfoil hat conspiracy. And whenever I say tinfoil hat conspiracy, I mean, yeah, there's no evidence to really prove this, but it would be an interesting twist if it happened that they knew this game was a big failure. They took a bunch of money, they pocketed a bunch of money that was supposedly put into production of a game, and now they're printing out a game to get banned so they can go bankrupt and keep the money they pocketed. And there's legal ways to do that and illegal ways. It is effectively the producer's scam. Oversell your game, get a loan for your game, and then pocket the money. Now, there's legal ways you can do that, though. You can certainly keep employees you like employed for a few more years, but does it really help them to do that unless you're just telling them, hey, you guys should really be looking for another job, to you're on redundancy notice, which is what they do in more developed countries than the United States very often. So, yeah. When you look at a game like Horses, you don't imagine it ever would have succeeded. Even if it was fairly censored and didn't have the nudity stuff and was allowed on Steam, I just don't think something like that is going to even make $100,000 in sales. In contrast, Brown Dust 2 is kind of already established, so based on Brown Dust 1, and yeah, you can see it's maybe not doing hugely great amongst gacha games, but still making $1,300,000 a month. And so I don't know if it particularly even is going to suffer that much not being on Steam. Steam is going to run into the censorship pushback, and consumers and gamers are doing the right thing by pushing against Steam every time they do censor a game. But eventually they are going to have to either adapt, or you're going to find the likes of DL Site all of a sudden having mobile storefront apps, and all the adult games moving over to DL Site, which maybe that would convince a lot more gamers to go over to DL Site, but still probably wouldn't really do anything. It's noticeable to also say that we have no evidence whatsoever that 2 years ago, when Horses was first rejected and finally rejected, first and final rejection from Steam, that any of the payment processors were actually putting any pressure onto Steam at that time. So this really feels like this was more of a banning directly from Valve themselves, although obviously laws had changed even 2 years ago that Steam and Valve are leaning on to make some of their decisions. Almost every year there's a new law that targets adult material and will target any animated character that often that will sweep up. The new law will sweep and include animated characters that might be described as looking underage. There's a famous I think it was a porno movie from several decades ago where it was a Brazilian porn actress, and someone was arrested for having underage porn because of the movie and the Brazilian porn actress, and they actually flew the Brazilian actress from Brazil with her birth certificate to, I believe, the United States to prove she wasn't underage. You don't get that same level of pushback because with animation for several different reasons, I suppose. But yeah, it's a growing thing. Certainly Brown Dust 2 is on Steam. Not on Steam, it's on DL site. It was banned from Steam. But I can't personally recommend it, having tried to play Brown Dust 1 and not getting past the intro section. Like, usually a game that is full of nudity, or even a game that's very lewd, like Goddess of Victory Nike, have like lewd imagery right in the first cutscenes, and I just wasn't really seeing that in Brown Dust. Maybe I played a censored version on the Google Play Store for Brown Dust 1, I'm not sure. And yeah, you may not particularly personally care about adult games, but obviously a large majority of mobile gamers do. Love and Deep Space is really more for girls, or at least male attracted people, and it's a lewd game at the very least. I'm not sure if there's nudity. Goddess of Victory is a lewd game, so you've got in the top 10 at least a couple of games that have heavy emphasis on lewdness. Yeah, and if we went down through more of these, you definitely have some that have some elements like that too, where there's a little bit of lewdness. Like Memento Mori has less than a medium amount of lewdness in my book, but it's still there. In the outfits, every now and then you'll see a character with a little bit more cleavage and stuff like that. Moving on, hardware numbers. There is room for figuring out a better way to use these charts. Maybe I could try and get this gap at the bottom reduced too, but I really don't have anything to say about hardware at the moment. Yep, it says we have now 215 hours into Balatro. I have 21 or 20 out of 31 achievements done. The Black Stake difficulty mid stakes achievement being the most recent one, which has only been done by 31.2% of players. I also had over $400, which has only been done by 16.9% of players. So yeah, you know that 2/3 of the people who own Balatro on Steam have not made it to the medium level of difficulty on any of the decks, which means they haven't unlocked the deck that is most recommended to play as, and that will help you get further in the game, which is the Anaglyph deck. The Anaglyph deck gives you a double tag at the end of each round. So you beat a boss, you get a double tag. Tags are given to you when you skip certain rounds, parts of rounds, blinds. Yeah, they're called blinds. So if you skip the the small blind or the big blind, you'll get a tag. The double tag will double that tag. It's a way in which you could get either a lot of spectral cards as you're trying to grind for the legendary jokers, which there's no way to get those, it seems, other than just grinding and hoping you get lucky, or a lot of negative jokers, which will let you continue to have more jokers. You could probably use it for something else, but I'm not sure anything else would really be worth it. There is definitely a point you win at ante-8, and then you can go into endless mode, and it overall ends at ante-16, but the amount of chips you would have to collect per hand just rises exponentially before you even get to NT12. And so one of the things I'm trying to unlock is getting to NT12. And yeah, even some of my luckiest, best runs still have not made it close enough to NT12. And so yeah, if we look at the achievements in particular for sort by time, that would be interesting. It really wouldn't matter too much. But if we look at the achievements that haven't been unlocked, there is an achievement for doing 100 million chips in a single hand, which also unlocks a card, which only 22.7% of players have. Having 80 more cards in your deck, I don't think really relates to unlocking anything in-game. Buying 5 vouchers by the end of Ante 5, I don't think relates to anything in-game. Win a run, at least on gold stake difficulty. On at least gold stake difficulty, so that implies that there's something above gold stake difficulty. I thought gold stake difficulty was the highest you can go, but you can see only 12.1% of players have done that. And then reducing your deck down to 20 or fewer cards, I could do that. Discovering every voucher has only been done by 5.8% of players. Discovering 100% of your collection is only done by 4% of players. This completionist achievement in particular is very hard because it means you would have to get all of the stickers at the highest level of difficulty, which means you would have to get win after win after win on the highest level of difficulty. It made the game like it was going to be the last game you'd ever play, and that's just not the case. And what's annoying about this, in my book, is you have a completionist achievement, but Steam only highlights when you get all the achievements. So then when you add a completionist plus and a completionist plus plus, that means you really only get highlighted on Steam by doing completionist plus plus and everything below that, which is earning a gold sticker on every Joker. Only 0.6% of players have achieved that. And so I probably am not going to get that. Win with every deck on gold stake difficulty, probably never going to get that. There is a possibility I would jump into Blatro every now and then while I had nothing else to do, but I'm realizing as I'm cleaning and decluttering, I still have plenty of other things to do. And so, unless I get stuck in bed, for some reason, if I was sick or couldn't move, then there was perhaps an argument that would happen, but there's just as equally an argument that I'm going to have failing eyesight. Let's see. Completing every challenge run has only been done by 2% of players, which really shows you how awful the challenges are. A lot of this you could fix fairly easily with tweaks to the game. Getting 5 wild cards to make a flush, that is something that occurred to me to do. It's just hard to do. But yeah, some of these achievements I might actively target, but I think I'm approaching the end of Blatro, as it just proves to be less and less likely that I'll unlock things. Suppose there might be room to bump this up too. Yeah, I'm getting nitpicky a little bit with adjusting the visuals, but it does make sense to handle that now and make it nice and rock solid for a future adjustments that might need to play and happen. Yeah, the Lego sale is still going on. I don't think I'm going to buy anything there. I don't know during the winter sale if I'm going to buy any video games either. I kind of blew the budget buying subwoofers. In fairness, it's probably been like 10 years plus since I last bought any surround sound equipment. Speakers tend not to go bad. A good speaker from 10 years ago, I would assume, is just as good as a speaker from now, if not better. That speaker quality may have actually gone down. Surround sounds and amps have gotten better, certainly, but an old surround sound still probably fine. So I've been waiting for a decent low-priced subwoofer to go on sale, something that wouldn't have been $600, which that is basically the other Slick Deal sales as far as subwoofers. Is spend $600 for a decent quality, mid quality, which I'm not sure what I got is even mid quality, or buy a bundle for $600 and get a whole bunch of fairly small, low quality speakers. Physical size on the speakers still would be a major indicator in my mind of their ability to actually generate sound. So the bigger, the better. Still, well, to a certain extent, there's a point where you have floor standing speakers that are probably huge and far too big for someone's space. Of course, I'm planning on setting up a surround sound theater, and that's probably not going to happen in a year even. Well, I'm also having a small percentage of chance of being forced to move. As I'm cleaning and decluttering, I'm also moving furniture. I moved a bookcase by myself, and the furniture that was there before is an older solid wood piece of furniture, but it really doesn't fit with what I'm looking for in my lifestyle, so I think I'm just going to get rid of it. It's actually a matching two-piece set. It is side tables that are bigger and wider and have just a single shelf under them. And they are very low to the ground. So I would say they are probably 2.5 feet to 3 feet off the ground. And very heavy and very hard to find a place to put them. You'd have to have a particularly low bed for it to make sense for them to be to make sense. I was thinking about putting them next to beds. We don't have any Steam Deck refurbs, but they're really lower than even a 2-drawer side table would be. So yeah, I don't really get it. If anything, they might. It would be stupid to do this, and they're probably interesting. They've added cancer warnings. I don't feel like this was here before, or maybe I've mangled how the site looks. But yeah. Scroll down here and see if that looks the same. Yeah. But there really is. It would be silly, but I could almost see them using it as a bed base and putting mattress on top of it, and then just having the lower shelves be your under the bed storage. But I don't even know why you would do that. You could just as easily have some box springs on the floor or have a mattress on the floor. You shouldn't sleep on the floor. It's bad for allergies. You're breathing in all the dust and dirt and hair that's on the floor. But yeah, you could just as easily have something else that is actually designed to hold a mattress than try and make a piece of furniture do that job. It almost feels like it would be a child's bed if you were going to do that either. Anyways, but yeah, I've decided that those pieces of furniture are just a couple other pieces that really should be tossed. I have probably several pieces of furniture that should be tossed because they just are too big, too unwieldy, not really utilitarian enough, not really useful enough. It's good furniture, but the people that tend to really appreciate old, heavy furniture are getting older and dying by the day, and because they're getting older and sicker, the older people, they're also getting rid of their own furniture and downsizing themselves. Let's look at what people are playing on Steam Deck. Yeah, Balatro still being played a lot. And perhaps that speaks to a problem with charts like this, is that people may be feeling the need to grind and keep on playing games well past the point of when they might really be super happy with the experience. I should probably come in here and take off these tags too, come to think of it. Yeah. Again, when speaking to a chart, it doesn't really matter if it's on my wish list or not. People are still liking Dispatch, but I think that you will see people having their fun with that, since it's a very narrative experience, and then not coming back to it for a while. You can see that a lot of these games are games that just last forever, like Vampire Survivors, or they are constantly getting updated like Helldivers to keep people playing. But yeah, some of the standouts here would be like Halo, where people are going back and playing that for nostalgia, or just playing it out of obsessiveness, even though there really isn't any new content. Fallout New Vegas is another example of that, I'd say. Imagine people are still grinding on Digimon Story Time Stranger, and they probably will be grinding on it right up until the DLC comes out. Yep. DF Retro said Sonic Racing Crossworlds is good. That's basically all they said, I think. That's pretty much all I had heard. I saw an interesting YouTube video stating, and I assume this is true, that the reason why Nintendo didn't put a chat app into the Switch 1, voice chat or text chat, and instead made the chat be its own separate Android application, is because they were effectively being lazy, and there had been a new law put in place to require game companies to have accessibility functions built in. Now, I have not seen any significant increase in accessibility functions in gaming, in consoles, or gaming in general, so whatever accessibility functions that were actually required were inevitably fought against by the ESA, which is in part chaired by Nintendo. They're one of the major members, and pushed back, and they got all kinds of deadlines and all kinds of extensions to deadlines to push it back, so that they didn't have to actually implement any of those accessibility features. But eventually the Library of Congress, who was put in charge of that law, said, we're not extending the deadlines anymore, you're just going to have to follow the law and have these accessibility features. Now, again, though, this is stuff that would have been 8 to 10 years ago. In the past 8 to 10 years, I've seen some people definitely talk about adding accessibility features and hyping it up like it was their idea and something they really wanted to do. Maybe there was legal reasons why they had to fund the development of accessibility features, but I think for the most part, nothing has really changed. My assumption is that Nintendo's laziness of implementing these accessibility features was to use Android's built-in text-to-speech features and screen reading features that is just built into the Android operating system, and thus not have to manually program those elements. Whereas I have no idea if text-to-speech or speech-to-text are requirements for accessibility features. I have no idea if the PlayStation or Xbox does that. You would think somebody would have said something there if that was the case at some point where it would have caught my eye. I would have been very interested in that. So they must have a very loose set of rules that they have to follow. It might be something as simple as that you must increase the size of the font if asked, or something like that. And that the idea of chat always needing something more complicated like speech to text or text to speech is not really required. If you're going to talk about accessibility features, there's still a lot of things that could be done that will help a small percentage of gamers, and that I don't think any of the consoles allow you to plug in a braille printer and see some kind of text if you're blind. In fairness, playing video games if you're blind is probably impossible. I don't think any of the chat features in particular require any kind of language translation. Some of that would be very trivial to do, like text-to-speech, pretty trivial if you are okay with robotic sounding text, which most actually disabled people are okay with that. Translating things to different languages if it's connected to a cloud service anyways, not particularly difficult to accomplish either. Adjusting the size of fonts, adjusting the colors of fonts, not particularly difficult either. There isn't any system that I know of where you can plug in a second monitor and potentially have a different size font for a chat window on consoles. Yeah. Certainly with my eyesight going, there is this chance that I might very well be forced into really having to look up accessible games. Although at this rate, I might skip right over being able to play games for a few more years and be completely at the point where I just can't play them at all. I'm still not sure I'm really that bad yet, though. Like when I'm playing Balertro, I'm not really having trouble reading the text with the glasses because the text is big and it's designed to be big. It's usually just when looking at websites where the text is small and they're anticipating the screen to be just a few inches away from your face and not 8 feet away from my face, which, yeah, I have been doing a lot of cleaning and decluttering, but I also did not move that new monitor into my room and clear a path there. So I started one project and then moved on to a different project instead, which, yeah, I'm cleaning out a different room, which at some point I could just turn into an office and stream from there and have a monitor closer to my face in that case. that is something I could think about doing instead. I don't know if I really would go with that, but it is a thought. Alright, well, that's been more than an hour warm-up, and it's time for my first bathroom break, so we'll take my first break, and then we'll come back, and we will do the video game news, starting with Video Games Chronicle. Be right back. Okay, I'm back. I need not dilly-dally today because we're starting later, so we'll jump into the Video Games Chronicle articles. Again, I feel like I tweaked everything and I got the auto update, auto open Steam links thing working. I think, weirdly, I think that the reason why the auto open Steam links thing wasn't working had mostly to do with just a filtering misconfiguration. It was not activating on pages it should be activating on, and I put a little bit of a delay in it, so hopefully it won't get me ever banned for opening too many links. Although typically a news article only has at most 20 links to Steam at most. Usually it only has one. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says, quote, better than a standard Switch Lite, end quote. A modder has turned a Wii U gamepad into a working Switch. He wanted to mix the ergonomics of the Wii U with the portability of the Switch. Well, there is something very noticeable about the ergonomics of the Wii U, in that this is obviously something built in the hand for players to actually, like adults, to actually be able to hold the controller correctly instead of the vertical lineup that they have for Joy-Cons that barely even works for teenagers' hands. Yeah, I'd be interested to know if like the NFC works, and if he got the camera, which it's interesting how the Wii U had a camera but the Switch does not. Remember, the Wii U originally, though, was just a wireless video receiver, and you had a whole box connected to it to run most of the hardware. Let's see. How long would a video like this be? 27 minutes. So I'm not going to watch all of this. I don't know if the Wii U even had a touchscreen. This audio is very echoey. So here's my issue. I should get rid of that too. Why not just 3D print a new case with more modern controllers and put a Switch around that new case, the Switch hardware around that new case, instead of going back to a Wii U form factor? Yeah, it doesn't really make that much sense to me. Sure, a lot of these projects are about can we do it, not why should we do it, but you could definitely turn a Switch into a better Switch easier. There probably are even aftermarket Joy-Cons you could just slide into the edge of a standard Switch body to get the ergonomics to be better, if not just aftermarket cases for the Switch. Yeah. I question whether there was any effort here to actually improve upon anything, and there's very little you can actually improve on the Switch and make it still work. Like, you can't really increase the resolution or increase the internal storage too much without heavily hacking it. And that would be the more interesting thing, is to take a Switch and hack in a massive amount of internal storage, so then you could have like ROMs from every Switch game, which Switch ROMs are pretty big, in the gigabytes, tens of gigabytes in size. So if you were to have a complete collection there, you probably couldn't put enough RAM in it internally and externally anyways. They only really make maybe 3 terabyte micro SD cards for a Switch, which maybe 3 terabytes would be enough for every single Switch game. Now, if you curate it down, you could definitely get it down to as little as a handful of games, and fit that on a much more cheaper micro SD card. But yeah, if you were trying to have the entirety of every Switch game, you might have to crack it open and solder in more RAM and hack more RAM into it, just to have internal and external hard drive space to support a complete collection. Then I don't know what else you do with the Switch, really. There were no accessories after the market to a Switch. You could perhaps put an Amiibo device directly plugged into it to simulate Amiibos without actually having to purchase Amiibos. Those are available cheaply from like AliExpress. As far as Amiibo NFC cloners. But yeah, you can't really add buttons. Can't really add functionality. Take note that there really hasn't been any major interest in modding the Steam Deck to do much more. Like, some people have tried to put more RAM in it. Didn't really change enough. Nobody's been able to put bigger batteries in it, or I don't even know what else you'd really want to do with it there. The biggest thing people would want with any console is just putting in better control sticks, and even that is not something that's done very often. That might be interesting, since it is pretty easy to take apart and repair a Steam Deck. There is a possibility that Valve will sell upgrade kits for old Steam Decks to put in more of their new, TMR analog joysticks. So the magnetic resonance, anti-stick drift sticks that they're going to put in their new controller. There might be an upgrade path that way, instead of just having people buy the new controllers alone, and then that would let Valve buy those TMR analog sticks in bulk, maybe save them a few dollars. But there is a heavy speculation that the number of Steam controllers that Valve is going to make and sell is going to be too small for them to really get any kind of bulk discount on any hardware. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says the Microsoft Flight Sim head says that bringing it to the PS5 was his idea, and believes it started the avalanche of Xbox titles coming to the PS5. Xbox originally refused his pitch to bring the game to PlayStation, he claims. So, okay. I guess we assumed it had to be somebody. And I do feel like Microsoft for a long time felt like Flight Sim was a tentpole game that was showing off the capability of Microsoft's code and Xbox's hardware combined, and that they did not want to give evidence that it could run well on a PlayStation. But those attitudes, I think, have been worn away. Certainly, I wouldn't want to be the person in charge of Xbox right now. You're relatively new. There's a couple new managers in the Xbox divisions. But yeah, they're relatively new people, and they are rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic with no real vision to maintain Xbox as a console, at least. And perhaps they have a plan. I'm not sure they really do, but maybe they do, of turning Xbox into more of just a publishing label or branding label, which, if you're just looking at the financials and the accounting, at least in the short run, that would make you more money, is just to be a publisher and not make the hardware. But you lose control as soon as things like that happen and you lose value in your brand, as soon as you're not really in control. Moving on, the Dragon Quest creator Yuji Horii says he'd like to add an AI chatbot into one of his future games. He says it would be fun to solve a mystery while chatting to a virtual partner. There is a game that's already, I think, failed pretty miserably in that it was supposed to be an AI murder mystery, and the AI, just like most AI, hallucinated facts and would tell you something completely different every time you talk to somebody. So if the thing was that you actually had to talk to AI to get clues or deduce the mystery, I don't think AI can be honest and accurate enough for that to be helpful. If the idea is that you just have an AI partner because you have no friends and you're playing a game, and then all the facts and accuracy elements are coming from non-AI stuff, well then you're just a sad, lonely person talking to an AI chatbot at that point. Now, I think this is going to be a continuing theme we see, in that you're going to have developers and directors a little disconnected from reality, thinking AI chatbots are the next big thing and like that. And I can certainly see that happening in Japan too. Like, Yuji Horii is probably of the right age to have seen a lot of the 90s and 80s era sci-fi anime shows and movies where the idea of having a AI friend or dealing with AI and it being useful was fairly common. The Tachikomis from Ghost in the Shell, at least Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, I believe are little spider-like robot tanks with AI running them. And I'm sure there's dozens of other examples, if I really thought about it, of characters having AI and AI actually working well in fiction. But yeah, our current AI is nothing like that. And a lot of times in those sci-fi shows, when you did have an AI, it was a character that was inherently in space or inherently alone for one reason or another. You know, one of the anime series, I think I have it on my shelf, has a little girl being cared for and raised by a bunch of robots with AI in them. And yeah, most of the time it would just have been called it robots, and AI wouldn't have even been mentioned as a concept. In like a post-apocalyptic world, and so they're effectively raising a human child, the last human child on the planet, and being friendly with it. It's one of the more sweeter animes. No big surprising twist there. There's one anime I guess I won't name for fear of spoiling it, where you have an anime girl who thinks she's a robot and turns out she isn't. And so for the majority of the series, you're thinking you're looking at an AI robot when you really aren't. And that was a bit of a twist, although most of the shows have some kind of twist. Moving on. Yeah, I don't want to ramble too much. Assassin's Creed Shadows lead says future Assassin's Creed games could have two heroes if we have a good reason to do it. Shadows team is also trying to focus more on parkour post-launch, the associate director says. This is barely squeezed onto the screen. Shadows was criticized for having a black protagonist even though he was a real-life person. The Japanese question whether that story is really true. It's not like there's real evidence for it. It may very well have been more myth than reality, and I think Video Games Chronicle is not getting into the full details, and maybe they don't know the full details because it was particularly the Japanese that were unhappy with the trailer, the initial trailer, well before the game even launched, because it was showing just not anything that would have better represented the ninjas of that time. Ninjas are inherently male, so this is a yonoichi female ninja, which, yes, there is sexism and racism of a different kind in Asia. But yeah, they weren't particularly happy that you weren't just getting a male ninja when every previous playable character in Assassin's Creed, I'm pretty sure, had a male character as your main default character. And yeah, only like Odyssey let you swap the gender of the main character to be either male or female, I believe, up until that point. And so then you have a samurai, but then not a Japanese samurai. And I think they probably were more peeved about it just being a non-Japanese person. So had it been a white samurai character, even if there was a myth of a white samurai character, which they made a whole Tom Cruise movie about that, and yeah, I don't think the Japanese super loved that movie either. What was that called? The Last Samurai? They would have been equally pissed. Yeah. You're setting this in a historical time. You're setting it in a country that has a populace that is highly conservative, and then you're trying to impose French moral wokeness, for lack of a better term, or French progressive thinking into the past. It's just not going to ring true for a game where you're really just wanting to run around and assassinate people, which I'm not even sure that's really the gameplay mechanics. There was actually fairly better reviews and reception and sales for Assassin's Creed Shadows compared to what the criticism for that initial trailer was. But yeah, I don't think we'll see in any future Assassin's Creed game something anywhere as off the mark for its target audience, in my opinion. It probably should have been the case that Ubisoft should have been sat down and said, if we were to make an Assassin's Creed game where the protagonist is a female assassin who happens to also be British, set in the 1000 year BC era of France, would that make sense? Would that be something that you would want? But oh, by the way, in case you don't want to play as a female British person, you can also play as a German male from the same time. But you're in France. You're in a time frame in France where those characters probably wouldn't exist. Those countries might not even exist at 1000 BC. It may have just been all the Roman Empire. Still, does that feel like something that would appeal to French people? And had you made that kind of direct comparison to it, and then forced the Ubisoft people to think about it more, they probably would have done better. Yeah. Notably, there have been several successes of more Asian games with Asian male protagonists, where they run around and do just about the same as what Assassin's Creed is now. Like, Where Winds Meet is out right now, and it's doing very well. Yeah. The Japanese in particular, I think, and Asians in general, want more accurate representation and more representation of people who look like them. And representation matters, but you cannot take representation away from one subset of minorities, Asians, who would definitely be minorities in France, to give it to another subset of minorities, whether that's female or Africans. And I guess that's probably as succinct as I can put it, and I think I did a pretty good job there without going into a huge ramble. It is a shame that that is the narrative and that is the story still around Assassin's Creed Shadows. Nobody's coming out and saying, hey, it's just a good game, you should just play it. I know like one person that said it's an alright game, but yeah, you would much prefer your game not have controversy around it and just have people say it's a good game worth playing, don't worry about anything else. Moving on, Kojima says OD is something entirely unique, but jokes that it could make Fizzant's stealth gameplay in his sleep. That he could make Fizzant's stealth gameplay in his sleep, but the familiarity is something he's trying to battle with, he says. I don't know what Fizzant even is. Yeah. I can talk about PhysX, a completely unrelated thing, in that PhysX was a feature in games like Borderlands 1 that was a big thing in NVIDIA, and apparently the hardware and the cores needed to run PhysX were left out of some of the 5000 series of NVIDIA graphics cards, where you would expect any newer graphics card would have some level of compatibility to play older games, that there would always just be a backward compatibility there, but apparently not. And so now NVIDIA has figured out some kind of emulation layer, one would have to assume, to reintroduce the capability of playing these games, these few older games that required PhysX. PhysX was definitely a big thing. Like I said, Borderlands 1 was one of the games that DF Retro was talking about, so that they can actually run. The other solution there would have been to have an older graphics card plugged in to run PhysX on that older graphics card, while letting the newer graphics card handle everything else, which is a messy kludge of a solution, certainly. Yeah, Fizzint, which has nothing to do with PhysX, apparently is some game I've not seen yet, or I've seen and completely forgotten already. Let's see. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says the Postal game developer shuts down after its project was cancelled due to allegations of generative AI use. The publisher's co-owner initially said people accusing the studio of using AI were, quote, ignorant a-holes. I think that response alone probably led to such a quick canceling of the project. I will say, in fairness, for the trailer I saw, I was not capable of really seeing anything that I would scream as AI generated art. But yeah, that really just speaks to my inability to tell the difference, I think, at this point. I think that is what's going to keep on happening. Yeah, this studio says, our studio was mistakenly accused of using AI-generated art in games, and every attempt to clarify our work only escalated the situation. In the last few hours, we've received a large number of threats, insults, and mockery, and which pushed us toward a difficult decision. We're truly sorry for the artists who put their soul into this and supported our studio only to face false AI accusations. It's tough to pour so much energy into a game and end up caught up in the middle of an AI war by accident. We've decided to shut down the studio and all future activities. Thank you for being with us. Stay strong. Now this is Goonswarm Games, the second-party developer of the game. Of course, here's their first thing: false AI accusations. The following day, the studio posted another statement conceding that some of the generative AI was indeed used, but only for promotional artwork, which it claims was created by external artists. Right, so you make one strong denial, next day you're admitting the truth. I think then they're going to lean heavily into the tried and true, oh, we've been receiving threats, harassment, and hatred, unprovable things always. Nobody ever comes out with, here's an anonymized example of the threats we've gotten. And even if somebody did come out with that claim, it's still hard to believe people who lie, and they inherently lied in claiming they were false AI accusations. I don't think the game is even out yet, so all of the content we would have seen would have been promotional material. So they're trying to play games with the wording of things. Yeah, I think this is perhaps an example of just how bloody the anti-AI war has to be, and that we have to see companies be accused of AI artwork. And maybe if they had come out and said, we absolutely hate AI and we definitely didn't use it, then there wouldn't have been as much pushback on that. Or they could have said, yes, we did use AI and we plan on doing it. You could have also gone that route. Undoubtedly, I think the reason why this game was shut down was because they didn't tell the publisher that they used AI. And the publisher didn't want that level of controversy, which is crazy for a Postal game to not want controversy. But yeah, there is definitely a case here where this is just what's going to have to happen, is that there's going to have to be multiple heads that roll for a revolution to really happen, and for companies to not be willing to touch AI with a 10-foot pole. Unfortunately, I think it is going to just be smaller games and smaller companies that actually do have their entire prospect of making money eliminated. I think if Microsoft uses AI and gets called out for using AI, they're just going to say, yeah, we used AI. What do we care? We're all in on AI. We've told you that before. So yeah, this is pushback to start with. One thing is the first step, but boycotts are going to have to also be a big thing. And it was easy to certainly push back and boycott a Postal game nobody really cared about. It's going to be harder when it is a game people really care about and they start sneaking AI into things, which they probably have been doing for years, but we're now looking for it, and we're going to now call it out. Inherently, Adobe Photoshop has had some kind of generative filters and AI in it for years. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says, Yu Suzuki Studio is considering legal action over a fake Shenmue 4 trailer. Yeeznet says a seemingly AI-generated video circulated last week, which is not real. Excuse me. Well, that's an interesting thing because certainly it would be a great way to shut down a leak by saying it was AI generated and fake when it might actually be real. But also, it does probably warrant some legal action if it's creating hype that's non-existent and just lying to society. For the most part, I think we have to be 100% anti-AI. Yeah, I can't think of too much reasons. Yeah, if they had labeled it, I guess, appropriately, just big words across the screen, AI generated, not real, fan art, things like that, then Sega might be a little bit kinder to it, but then maybe not. Japanese companies in general do like to pursue copyright, what they perceive as copyright infringement. Unfortunately, in Japan, copyright infringement runs the risk of actual jailing, which is insane. And right now, the Japanese in particular are heavy into supporting artists and creators, as they are seeing that as one of their last natural resources that they can lean on to maintain a cultural community and financial economic growth. But yeah, I don't even think I want to play and watch this AI trailer. Let's just move on. The Tekken boss, Katsuhiro Harada, says he's leaving Bandai Namco this month. Harada says Tekken's 30th anniversary is the most fitting moment to leave. He definitely doesn't look that old, although this is very much a stylized, filtered image. And certainly, if he's been there since day one of Tekken, 30 years at any job is more than long enough. But yeah, Tekken I don't think has been doing particularly great amongst fighting games. And I don't know if I really expect him to go and do too much more or make a new game or make a new company. Probably, if he was going to form a new company, would be just a high up manager. Apparently he worked on Summer Lesson and Pokken Tournament and Soul Calibur series. Yep. If there is a bigger, deeper story to why he's leaving, I don't think we're gonna get it yet. But I could see where the Bandai Namco studios in particular are just not as appealing a place to stay working at these days. We are seeing a bit of a trend of game developers going off and forming their own studios and not just sticking with giant corporations who have either been acquired or become corporations that are too big to have the kind of momentum you would want in a game company. Moving on, Xbox was outsold by a little known Kinect style console during Black Friday. The NEX Playground crashed the Black Friday hardware charts in the US. I don't even know what this is, and as a gadget file, that really speaks to how unpopular I guess Xbox was. Yeah, there's just really no reason though why you would buy an Xbox. That being said, I didn't recommend buying a PlayStation 5 either. Switch 2s are available. I don't know if there was really any discounts for them, and there are only a couple of games on the Switch 2 worth playing. Metroid Prime 4 has come out, and seems alright, but it also is a game that's been in development forever, and so effectively you're looking at a Switch 1 game that hasn't really done anything too special. They are noticeably still trying to have male secondary characters or any secondary characters in a Metroid game. And I think the problem isn't the gender as much as it's just there shouldn't be any secondary characters in a Metroid game. And if it is going to be a secondary character, it probably should just be a little AI character that would pop up and say, hey, go this way. But even at that, your computer, your scanner, your visors in Metroid have always been on-demand electronic devices, not talking back to you, annoying secondary characters, AI characters. But yeah, the Japanese inherently don't know what makes Metroid appeal to the rest of the world, and so the second party developers in charge of making Metroid games keep trying to make Metroid not about Metroid, not about Samus Aran. Really, I don't know if we're going to run into Metroids too often, even in this newest game. I played Metroid Dread, that would have been the most recent one, and even that one really didn't feel like a good Metroid game because of the unbeatable boss characters that you had to escape and run away from, which felt like about half the game. Metroid 4 probably is closer to what I would want, as far as Metroid Prime 4 is closer to what I'd want as far as the game goes. And I heard it described as an Ocarina of Time or open world type experience, which maybe speaks to where the thought patterns and development towards a Zelda game have been shifted, because Breath of the Wild and Breath of the Wild 2, Tears of the Kingdom, I guess is what it's actually called, both went away from the Ocarina of Time concept in that there aren't really any dungeons in those games. Although I guess Tears of the Kingdom probably has more dungeons, has a few. But both games are fairly open world in their design philosophy. So interesting that a Kinect style console called the Next Playground even exists. This may very well be UK sales in particular. It's an Android powered console launched in 2023, so it's been out for a while. But yeah, looking at this screenshot, I could see where something like this might appeal to families more than an Xbox when you're thinking about buying a console for a new generation. Whoever the photographer here should tell this guy to relax and do more of a layup and not arch his back and stick his butt out as much as you would doing a jump shot. Yeah. Yeah. Costs probably came heavily down to it too. And in the UK, PS5 sold well, which is not super surprising, I guess, if you must buy a console. I wouldn't be surprised if the percentages hide overall facts, though, that sales numbers overall may be lower. Although maybe it wasn't. Maybe a lot of people in the UK decided this is going to be your last opportunity to get anything even slightly on sale, and that everything else is probably just going to go up in price. The next Video Games Chronicle says PS5 dominated Black Friday console sales in the UK, with the PS5 Pro marking its best week since launch. Heavily discounting helped the PS5 take over 60% of the Black Friday console sales. Yeah, 60% of the sales were the sales overall higher, or the same as last year. Well, according to this, year over year, it was 14% up on revenue, so things were more expensive, and unit sales were up by 7%. Yeah, particularly in the UK, I could see where people may still get a lot more PlayStations just for the soccer games and those standard UK games that are unique to non-US countries, European countries, on top of the regular ones overall. Although, when you look at the list here, it's just EA, FC Soccer, Football Club 26, and then the rest of these are things you would definitely see sell well in the United States. Sports games in general still taking up 2 out of the 10 spots. Then Nintendo games and kids games taking up a good spot, and then your standard 2 military first-person shooters, Call of Duty and Battlefield, taking up a spot. F1, I guess, is a sports game. Ghost of Yoti is perhaps the most interesting one in the list, as that is the one that you would least expect, and I guess you wouldn't see it at all there if it wasn't being pushed fairly heavily by PlayStation and Sony. Which maybe that goes to show that Sony really only has enough publishing attention to put on one big AAA Japanese style or Japanese looking game, or Asian style, Asian looking game in general. None of the China Joy games I think are even out yet, but I doubt any of them are going to be in the top 10 sales in Europe anytime soon. Yeah. Oh, I think I was thinking of something else, but I think it slipped my mind. I don't know why I bothered to even say it out loud when that happens. Alright, well, that's going to bring us to video games, Gamatsu video game news. So we'll look at that. And this is where we'll see, at least for Gamatsu, all the Steam links opened, which typically that has been the way it goes, is that Video Games Chronicle doesn't actually link to games on their page. I wish they did, but honestly, on me, eventually just decided it's not worth following Video Games Chronicles as a news source. Moving on, Calamity Angels Special Delivery is coming to PC in 2026. It's a closed beta test. Registration is now available. Looks like it is an RPG game. I did correct this. I don't know what specifically was going on there with my Violent Monkey scripts, but apparently by touching all of the code, whatever event JavaScript hooks that were tied into clicking these arrows were getting messed up. I don't know why. You would think it wouldn't have changed anything, but it did. But now I fixed it by simply not touching that code, which I think solves the whole issue. What inherently it does also is it puts us in a good position to think about some other things as far as the Gematsu title text replacement. Really only needed to replace this, so it makes it more efficient. I still haven't gotten to the meat of it as far as updating the code here to add a whole bunch of stuff here, but I put more thought into it. Coming soon is another tag that I guess I should seek out and move up to the top here. The idea is I want all the relevant information that might be down below the fold, as they would call it in newspaper terms, instead taking up this spot that's pretty empty otherwise. Yeah, this may have fit if this checkbox wasn't added, and that checkbox is going to go away. So yeah, but yeah, I've only put a few minutes into trying to update the carousel so that the images would move a lot faster when looking at a game. And yeah, it's kind of hard to do this coding when your eyesight is also getting worse by the moment. It's hard to see the text effectively. I'm going to copy this because I'm also going to put it on the follow list. But I also need to deal with it, although having two tabs with the same name also is going to potentially break my macros to making YouTube shorts. Moving on with the Gematsu articles, I Am Future is coming to the PS5, Xbox Series, and Switch on January 8th, 2026. I tweaked the AMD to be the ampersand sign, save a little bit of space there. Again, just trying to have everything take a bunch. I think I also tweaked how like Facebook videos will show up on one of my news sites. I'm not sure which one because they weren't taking up the full screen. Probably tweaked a few other things. A little tweak here, a little tweak there. We can see I Am Future is already super popular on Steam. Mostly positive at 70% recently, 85% overall. Yeah. So we'll close that tab. Incantation for the PS5, Xbox Series, and Switch launches March 26th. Xbox Series demo is now available. This looks like a creepy horror game. Partial nudity. Maybe I shouldn't show it. Yeah, let's come over here and I'll describe it. Okay. So it's a Chinese person driving and a lady, it looks like, holding a picture of a baby. The baby looked like it had like three marks on it. The lady was being driven by a police officer. And then they were in a car crash, and it looks very horrific. It says it's based on a Taiwanese horror movie. I saw the silhouette of a topless grandma-like creature. Saw some pop-in. They've got the statues that move when you don't look at it. There's I saw now the full depiction of the topless grandma monster looking creature. There's a little girl character that plays a big role, but she's a little girl, not the baby, so maybe the baby has grown up. Seems like you're going to be doing some level of creeping and crawling and escaping. So yeah, I probably could have shown that trailer. So yeah, it looks like a horror game. I don't know if there's too much more to say here. We can show, I think, individual screenshots and we'll be fine. Can see that it's mixed in the last 30 days at 66%, where overall it's mostly positive. There's this incantation symbol. I was looking at Unicode and there's I Ching hexagrams, I think they're called hexagrams in Unicode, deep down into Unicode. And I was looking at them and trying to figure out where they came from and why they were in Unicode. Unicode has effectively every symbol for every language, including dead languages and made up languages potentially in it. So I was trying to see if there was a character that would be the letter E and the letter A for early access, and in the end I didn't find a character that was the letter E and A as one symbol, or as kind of a emoji, which emojis are even further down in Unicode standards, and I didn't get that far to see if there was an emoji like that. But yeah, in the end I decided it wasn't worth looking for Unicode things and just typing out the text. So my guess here is that they kidnapped this baby and then they're having this baby raised to be some kind of sacrifice in this creepy village. Looks like you're going to solve some puzzles in it and go on this narrative experience. That's the cop that was driving you. You play as, I assume, the mother of the baby looking for your child. And then there's a whole bunch of creepiness that you run into throughout the whole experience. Yeah. So I'd like to see what the negative. Let's see. 90% of walking sim, which isn't obvious from the trailers. It's very linear. Most NPCs are stationary, encounters scripted, and mostly dealt by a single button prompt. Story is bad. Character building is bad. Didn't feel any emotions towards anyone. Not worth it. Just watch the movie. It's cheaper. Only solved the last puzzle by luck. Unplayable. Stories understandable. This might be one of those cases where it's lost in translation, and playing it in Chinese might mean a better experience than playing it in English. It says it's based off a Taiwanese story, so yeah. Chinese would probably be the language to play it in if you had that understanding that you could play it in Chinese. Yeah. It's close. It really is close to me potentially taking it off the wish list. So let's just put it back on the fall list in that case. We can deal with that later. Let's see. Despilote for the Switch launches December 11th in the Americas and January 13th, 2026 worldwide. Switch version of a first-person slice-of-life soccer game has been dated. Feels like this is some kind of weird meme trailer. I'm not even gonna bother to watch it. Let's see. On Steam, though, you can see it's very positive. So there must be something here that catches people's attention. Let's see, the System Shock remake for the Switch 1 and 2. And see, I probably should still have ampersand in here, but it just feels right for some reason to me to make it 1/2. Although maybe it should be a backslash instead of a forward/. Maybe that would feel less like 1/2. I'm not sure. New developer diary was also released. It's coming out December 18th. It has been on Steam as far as the System Shock remake since 2023. And yeah, it is mostly positive at 76%. Very positive overall at 90%. Yeah. I can't help but feel like more recent negative reviews come down to people who really love System Shock knowing what it was, whereas people getting into the game now probably don't know its history and just thought it was a brand new game. Certainly they're not labeling it as a remake in any way. I think there probably is also a certain level of hate that they're getting because System Shock 2 remake. Yeah. Here you have, I guess if you like the original game, but you might like it or never played the first one. I've never played the first System Shock or the first version of System Shock either, so I could see myself having a hard time with it too. Moving on, Holston is going to be published by Team 17. It's a 90s Poland-infused psychological survival horror game, which that certainly is a description of a game. Interesting art style with the sunken-in eyes and the lack of color depth in how things are animated. Of course, it seems like you're mostly just going to be looking at this screen more than anything. If only it was so easy for every game to potentially try different filters and different art styles. Yeah, it really isn't that easy. You can't just apply a filter and change a game in most cases. Although noticeably Borderlands was able to do that. But they more than likely created a game that, a system that made it very easy to change its setup. Microids announces King of Tokyo video game for PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. I would assume this is a kaiju battling game. It may be player versus player, maybe single player. Let's see. Yeah, actually it's single player and split screen PvP, which I would have thought there would have been some online element here. But then also it's a strategy card battler board game, which I definitely wasn't getting any of that element either. Well, that puts it in a very weird position where I just have no clue as to what's really going on there, or how well that game would actually play. We talked about Katsuhiro Harada leaving Bandai Namco after more than 31 years. Second quote here is, I'll share more about my next steps at a later date. Yeah, you can see he actually does, for a Japanese person, look fairly old. Although definitely getting a lot of coolness factor. There was an article on Reddit when we look at a guy who looks way too pretty for being a director of a video game company. But yeah, apparently many Asian countries have ridiculous discrimination going on, and I can only call it discrimination from a United States perspective, and perhaps from an ugly perspective as someone who would count him amongst those numbers. But apparently a Asian man with a very square jaw and square looking face has been rejected from more than 20 factory line assembly type jobs because his face is too square / he's just not Asian similar enough to looking like other Asians / he's just too ugly. And honestly, I don't think he's really that ugly. He just has a very square face. And there's a lot of speculation as to why this would be. And as far as I could suss, it seems like it's just kind of the standard thing that is allowed in many Asian countries, where you have to submit headshots with your application to a job. Whereas, I mean, inherently, even in the United States, you are going to likely do a face-to-face interview with somebody before you get a job, and there is plenty of room for discrimination to be done at that point. But they're in the United States not so blatant about it, and they're not going to make actual paperwork records to admit that's why somebody was rejected from being hired for a job. But yeah, I can't help but wonder if maybe even in Japan, that's why so many more successful middle managers and up in Japan do often look better than you would expect them to. But yeah, vanity does seem to just play a big role too. Plus, in Japan, if you're spending less time spending money on kids because you don't have any, probably do have more time to work on your own personal appearance. On the other hand, I guess I can't admonish it too much, because I'm sure that level of vanity and wanting things to be pretty leads directly into the style of animation and filmmaking that happens in Japan anyways, in that you really don't have even medium good looking characters in most animes and most TV shows. They are usually extremely exaggerated beautiful, or extremely exaggerated ugly in a few rare cases. Moving on, Dragon Quest VII Reimagined character trailer for Kiefer is available on Gematsu if you want to check out that trailer. Dragon Quest VII Reimagined is not out yet. Cassette Boy launches January 15th, 2026. It's a puzzle action RPG game, apparently. One of the things I think, particularly today, would make a lot of sense is to try and reduce the number of trailers we're watching. Really can't do too much about that though, otherwise I just feel like I'm not actually getting the information and covering the news. So this is a perspective shifting game where if you don't see it, it stops existing. Does it return to existing when you do see it? That's a thing that could have played into like a Fez game, or Fez 2 if they were going to ever make Fez 2, which I doubt they are. Yeah. So yeah, that caught my attention a little bit. Whereas visually, I'd probably dismiss this game outside of that. I suspect we are going to have a lot of trailers happen in the next couple days, because I'd forgotten how many supplemental pre-show things happen around the Video Game Awards. So it's not just going to be the Video Game Awards coming out and that being a trailer fest. It's also going to be like Women in Gaming Awards also having a ton of trailers. So brace yourselves for several very long streams, I think, this week as we go through massive amounts of trailers, and prepare your brain to just be completely overwhelmed and forget all those trailers by this time next year. Which, yeah, I could not name a single trailer that played last year during the Video Game Awards. But it is news, so I can't feel great about potentially skipping it completely, which would be my only other real option, would be to completely try and skip it. Let's see. Yakuza / Like a Dragon Series 20th Anniversary Concept Video is available. I would assume this is not the AI generated video, which was a Shenmue video. So you can certainly see where this is 2 minutes long. You can certainly see where somebody would be upset, Sega would be upset, as they're trying to promote Like a Dragon, and they're trying to have the news stories be about that. For somebody to release an AI game, an AI leak that's not even really a leak of a Shenmue game that's not actually being developed. Which, yeah. Unfortunately, that does point to a future where people are going to just, companies are going to sue other people to try and better promote their products and scare people from even making fan art in favor of leaving only enough room for their advertisements. Although I don't know how different that is from now. Every single company really does just want to own the advertising platforms, and for the most part they do as a group, but they would like to own them individually. This is a pretty boring trailer because it's just Japanese people saying something and it's not being translated to English. I had a thought. I'm a big fan of the Taskmaster series on YouTube, is the best way to watch it. And there's one of their spin-off shows that's in Sweden, one of their early spin-off series, and it's only in Swedish. And so the UK Taskmaster series, the original one, should probably have some of the previous contestants, which they do a lot of bringing back previous contestants for little things from many years ago. But yeah, they could take, like, they've done like 20 seasons, as you call it in the United States, of Taskmaster, with 5 people each series. So they've got about 100 people they could pick from to find 5 people to do the first season of Taskmaster Sweden and dub over the audio, which would be kind of funny, certainly, to have face actors doing the dubbing, recognizable face actors doing the dubbing of Taskmaster Sweden, and you would potentially have them, since they're mostly comedians, add their own commentary and show them in the recording booth every now and then. And then you could make it more available to only English-speaking people. That would be interesting. It might cause a slight controversy in that there could be a case where the voice actors in the UK get upset that they're losing work to comedians. But I bet that really wouldn't cause a controversy at all. There's still something not really working. Almost certainly I did make a YouTube short, or went through the process of getting the data to make a YouTube short. I haven't actually made or scheduled or released a YouTube short in months now. It is another project to work on, and I was putting off a lot of these projects to build a new computer, but I'm not getting very far with that. I haven't worked on that in probably a month now. So yeah, there is that possibility of that being a thing. Yeah, I keep losing my train of thoughts. There's a possibility I should jump in here and, well, I'm going to change that code anyway, so I really just need to move forward and change the code. The way these checkboxes work will go away. I did find the code to add something to the follow list, by the way. I'm pretty sure I can figure out how this works. The way Steam pages work is kind of crazy because they're adding their own special HTML attribute that then the JavaScript, I think, is acting on. So it is half HTML and half JavaScript, whereas you would have thought it would have all been JavaScript being injected into a HTML element. That's definitely how I would have thought of doing it, instead of separating the code out in such a weird way. Maybe there's a scaling reason why you would separate the code out, but I question it, really. It seems to me like maybe it's a case where you're hand coding the HTML pages and then you're changing the JavaScript very rarely. That would be my guess. Moving on, this is actually our third to last Komatsu article, it looks like. Or we're going to get out of order. It looks like we may get out of order. Dragon Quest VII Reimagined character trailer for the protagonist, which apparently has no name. Which there is definitely a danger in that. Zig is working on a character custom creator for his character, for the protagonist in his game, and it gets hard when you have particularly a visual, but it's still hard when you don't have a name to actually apply to your protagonist as far as advertisements go. It is pretty crazy to have a character that is just called protagonist. Even at that, you still know what the protagonist looks like, because I don't think in this game you have a character creator to change the appearance of the protagonist, at least maybe not initially. Yeah, that gets in the way of advertising, and so you either need a strong NPC character to focus on for your advertising, or you need to have a strong default protagonist design, which I think for custom character creation you probably need a default design for people who just don't care about that in the first place. And certainly for Zig's game, since you are in a third-person perspective and you're going to see the character you're playing as, custom character creators makes sense. Whereas in Fallout New Vegas, I played that whole game in first-person perspective, and even if you shifted to the over-the-shoulder third-person perspective, you still wouldn't see the face of the character in New Vegas. Ultimate Sheep Raccoon launches December 9th. Bike racing party game. It's now dated. I think we talked about this in the last stream. And then 2XKO for PS5 Xbox Series launches January 26th. Wish listing now is available. Yeah. I am particularly not interested in watching trailers when you have just humans talking to the screen for a video game. I'm not particularly interested in that, even if I had a movie, or like a live action movie. I'm not particularly interested in just humans talking to the screen about that. Although in fairness, a movie is only 2 hours of commitment, so I wouldn't inherently think too much about watching a trailer. Anyways, so this should be what's taking us to the Gaming on Linux and GameDeveloper.com articles, but it's out of order. So we have a GameDeveloper.com here saying Kingdom of Gaming event to debut in Saudi Arabia with state backing. The conference will purportedly seek to unite developers, studios, and investors. Which, yeah, the name is very much on the nose as far as what Saudi Arabia is looking to do, it seems, which is to create a kingdom of gaming where Saudi Arabia can be the king of entire industries around the world, potentially, or at least a major player. Speaking of Saudi Arabia, we had talked about in the last stream that Netflix had agreed to acquire Warner Brothers. Well, now the Paramount Network, which is apparently being funded heavily by Saudi Arabia, has put in their own bid offer, which technically I think makes it a hostile offer because it was not welcome, I guess, to acquire WB. So a bidding war of some sorts may have started here. Now, if Warner Brothers got owned by Paramount, it probably would be very bad for Warner Brothers in general, since Paramount as a streaming service and as a company hasn't really been great as far as making content that actually comes out, although it might be better in the long run for movies actually getting made and put out in theaters, whereas Netflix was going to definitely try to put less movies in less theaters over time. Like, yes, they'll put some movies out in theaters in LA and New York, but they won't bother to put out movies in the middle of a small town in some flyover state in the United States. Just because they won't really care about that market, not even because it would be hard. So yeah, we'll have to see what happens on that story too. Yeah, the assumption is that lots of Saudi Arabia funding is just going to be rubber stamped under the current presidency. So yeah, I don't know if it was not really getting rubber stamped by the previous presidency or several previous presidencies, really. Let's see. This week I also saw on Reddit, Iran, not Saudi Arabia, had women not wearing burqas running in I think it was a march, but it looked like it might also just be a running marathon thing. There has been recently, in the past couple of years, more and more pushback and demand for freedoms from women to choose whether they want to wear a burqa or not, and many are choosing not to wear a burqa, where previously Iran was having their secret religious police attack, beat, and arrest women who weren't covered up completely. Iran inherently was one of the most progressive Islamic countries before the Iranian Revolution, which a big part of that is probably the United States' fault, at which point they instilled a religious theocracy dictatorship in Iran, and they have been under that rule for many decades. They overthrew a royal lineage before. Yeah. And I think Iran has the pretense of democracy now, but what is democracy really when you have no freedom and no choices? Moving on, that has nothing to do with video games. It's just something I saw. We have Komatsu, this week's Japanese games releases, Microsoft Flight Sim 2024, Gekiso, Bandstar, and more. Several listing here. Some of these are already available, though, worldwide. Some of these are going to lead to grave disappointment. If I recall, House of the Dead 2 remake being pretty bad. Didn't realize that Flight Simulator 2024 for the PS5 was releasing right now. It is pretty late to the party. You can see, though, there's a much longer list of digital games, and that seems like that list is getting longer. Particularly, I'm thinking that we're going to see the list get longer as things are not allowed, specifically on Steam, or not allowed on consoles and Steam. We haven't gotten quite to the point, though, where we're seeing DL site listings or things that are on PC on other sites get mentioned as much. But now would be the time to invest in DL site. I think there's a decent chance that in 10 years DL site is going to be a secondary market that is going very strong, more than possibly even good old games is going strong, as we see more censorship happening on Steam and more people willing to go to a secondary storefront to avoid censorship. Here's GameDeveloper.com saying that Tekken Boss is leaving Bandai Namco, so obviously it's big news if all three of your sources are talking about it. Let's see. Unbeatable. It's not out yet. We're cycling, I think, through games that either just came out or are about to come out. Let's see. This might be an interesting game to potentially compare to Horses as far as dead format goes. There are some live action footage in Horses, and that too may have gotten it banned. Oh, the other thing to mention is it may very well have not been the lewd content in Brown Dust 2 that got it banned from Steam. It may have been the blatant violations of the wishlist campaign, because they were promising rewards / bribing people to wishlist their game, which is not allowed. Those kinds of water heaters that are used in more European countries are crazy. An electric water heater directly in your shower to heat up water, cold water, from that point. I mean, it is just a crazy idea to have electricity that close to water. Even though it might be space saving and somewhat more efficient on running plumbing, there is, I suppose, an argument though that a wireless controller for water temperature might make sense, but then you'd have to have some kind of probably very overpriced mixing valve that the wireless connector would connect to. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, guess I'll leave it at that. I'm losing steam here. There is a report, according to GameDeveloper.com, that IM 8-Bit is suing Skybound, alleging fraud. IM 8-Bit alleges its business partner, Skybound Game Studios, is in breach of contract. Let's see. They say they failed to provide accurate financial reports according to the contract. A multi-year accounting scheme. The most boring of lawsuits, the financial ones. Yeah, very believable. Also accuses Skybound of interfering with a deal IM was working on for promotional materials with indie darling Stray, claiming Skybound used confidential information about IM-Bit's royalty split with the publisher, and Annapurna Interactive to cut out its business partner. Also claims that Skybound produced almost exact copies of its creative output for marketing. Alright, well, those are some strong accusations. Very believable accusations. I'm a little surprised we don't have more lawsuits like this happen. In particular, and I guess that is one of the rare downsides that you have to be concerned about to some extent, is that when you are dealing business with somebody, you are effectively getting in bed with them, and any bad diseases they might have or bad practices they might have is going to directly affect you. I feel like there was a better way to say that, but I don't know really how. If only we could all just invest our own extra $1 million or two that we have spare. I'm sure we all have an extra million or two, don't we? Haha, slash sarcastic, to develop our own games. Or, I mean, it's not even the money 100%, it's also the skill set. Many people won't have the publishing skills. You just look at Gematsu news articles, like, it is a tiny fraction of people who put a game out on Steam that even bother to send an article or a link or press release out to Gematsu or any other news sources, which, yeah, be easy enough to contact people and say, hey, can you mention my game here? And honestly, you probably should be doing that before you are even putting your game on Steam, although you don't want to get too annoying about it. But yeah, 6 months before a game gets listed on Steam, a year before a game gets listed on Steam, both feel like good times to put out a press release before actually releasing your game on Steam. And this says that we're going to be looking at all the new games on Steam, and while we are doing some of that, I think there is also a decent chance that we're going to run into more Gaming on Linux or Gematsu articles. There may just not be any Gaming on Linux articles, but I would question that. Alright, so if I'm interested in a game really, I'll put it on the fall list. If I'm swiping this way, I'm leaving it to make a YouTube short on it. If I'm going this way, I am closing the tab, either because I don't want to make a YouTube short on it or because I already have. And yeah, try and move through all these games fairly quickly. It certainly would be nice if this was a shorter stream. Just close that one just based on the mixed reviews alone. We have been consistently running into really long streams for the past couple of weeks, which feels crazy. Certainly, because it definitely doesn't feel like there's a lot of news worth talking about at the end of the year, nor does it feel like there's just immediately dismiss that game. I think we can probably say the same for this one. It almost feels like what should happen and what is happening are complete opposites, and instead you just have a lot of people shoving out their game for, I don't know, financial reasons perhaps, that they need their game out by a fiscal year for some contractual or tax reasons, and because of that they rush to release. Now usually I'll dismiss a text-based game. They're calling this a visual novel, and by a weird definition I guess it does fall under that category, but just having a little bit of art here helps. Now let's scroll down and see if the art is AI generated. AI voiceover for the trailer. Do you even really have to call that AI at that point? Why not just call that text to speech? Like, I would not hold it against somebody for saying I used text to speech for the voiceover in the trailer, and then not disclosing that as AI, unless they're using AI to make the trailer actually sound like somebody and steal the verbal likeness of somebody, which at that point I would expect them to admit that they're using AI and not do that, because that's just rude. Probably illegal, but also just rude. I don't need Obama or Morgan Stanley or somebody like that to do the audio trailer on a video game. Yeah, that still exists. Cameo still exists, so you can straight up hire voice actors on sites like Cameo to do voice actor work. Then I guess if those people cheated and used AI, then that would suck, but at least you would have tried to do it the right way, enrich society and give artists an opportunity to create. The quality of games still is pretty low overall as far as what's getting released on Steam. Yeah. Inherently, if Valve was going to just start curating games that are coming out on their storefront and have a bug up their butt about certain games, you'd think they'd try and crack down on the just absolute garbage first. But then I guess maybe the garbage doesn't put them in any sense of discomfort, whereas at least some faction of employees at Valve are clearly uncomfortable with certain adult games, or a lot of them, really. I mean, it's not like there's a flood of other adult games that are getting approved to make up the difference. Well, this looks weird. The other thing I've noticed, though, as far as the games we've gone through in the past couple days, is I have not seen the adult warning pop up at all. I know that there's going to be at least one game that won't have the tags to actually have it pop up. Maybe, well, that's a need for me to improve on it, but yeah. So there might very well be a much higher amount of forcing adult games to actually be in the adult section going on right now, which is causing me, who is not looking at the adult section, to not see those games, which the vast majority of people don't have the option turned on to see adult games on Steam. Yeah, we were averaging 3 or 4 adult games at minimum every time we went through all the new games in a 3 or 4 day period. Almost said yes to that, but not quite. Yeah, I don't know if this art style is good enough for a video game, visual novel. But yeah, here's one that clearly is in the adult section, or should be in the adult section, even if they have censored it and covered up the massive boobs of this character, and there is some kind of uncensored patch, or maybe there isn't an uncensored patch, just the unnatural proportions here feels like that should be a thing. And yeah, this should be a pop-up, and it didn't pop up. I'm confused as to that. So my new code is not working, and the only thing I can assume is that this hentai tag is in a wrong spot, and so I'm gonna have to work on that to make sure my code actually works. But yeah, I didn't heavily test it. Thank goodness that game only had just clothed big anime girl character. Also, the game looked like garbage. Okay, so here it did work, and the reason I would assume is that it's because the first position and the first tag has sexual content in it. It's called How to Create a Witch, and yeah, I'm not going to show that one. I will look at it. Now this one, again, not in the adult section, is tagged sexual content nudity. The first screenshot I see is an anime girl that barely has a couple of cloths over her boobs, so you're getting lots of cleavage, lots of side boob. And then in the background it looks very much just like an RPG Maker game, and the one pose of the anime girl in a small state of dress is seemingly being used over and over again. Also, it doesn't really feel like it supports English. She's wearing barely a thong, so you're seeing a lot of hip ratios. I I've never really gotten a good feeling as to how much hip is too much hip as far as that goes. But yeah, there is a certain amount of hip and thigh I think that people would find unacceptable in certain circumstances, but I think maybe the circumstances are a little ill-defined too, because inherently a bikini bottom wearing character on TV might be okay as long as you're only looking at them from the front and from some side angles. Yeah. JRPG Rogue. Looks like it had a bit better thumbnail than most. Noticing that some of these pages have bigger images, it feels like, than others. I don't know if that's really true or if there's just a misperception on my part, but yeah, it just feels like, based on the size of this text, this gets scaled a little bit differently to fit in the space. Yeah. A lot of these games are way too simplistic, and then they're trying to have a little bit of animation based on even simplistic animation styles. Yeah. And this one jumped down. I don't even know why. Yeah, if I could just get this stream to be about 3 hours long, I would be fairly happy. Although, for the rest of the day, I don't know if I have much more that I can do. I'll probably stay up all throughout the night and work on some other things. But, yeah. Probably won't accomplish too much. This looks very polished. This looks like a slightly different art style. Terminator 2 No Fate is out, or is about out. I don't know why we're seeing games if they're not out now. Yeah. I don't know what would have triggered that to open. This is a very different looking animation style. It feels like an old NES game. Yeah. The Super NES game, more likely. Might actually be an old Super NES game. Yeah. My best strategy would be to make YouTube shorts immediately after the stream. Hop into Balatro. I keep calling it Balatro, it's Balatro. And try and win some of the challenges off screen, because I have no interest in showing the challenges on screen. So then I can show off the last 2 challenges which haven't been unlocked, and then that would set me up for success. I think in general I don't care about looking at a flawless cleanup. Yeah. That is weird. So all the games over this weekend, only 2 of them looked like they had adult content in them, or could have adult content in them. Which, yeah. I would expect closer to 5 adult games. I wonder if I could be 100% secure in my new code if I wouldn't be able to actually check that checkbox, and then we could talk about adult games. Maybe. I'd almost have to strip out elements though, and even text on YouTube though, it's potentially gonna get you in trouble. So it feels like that would just be really dangerous. Best thing I can say at the moment is just like check out Sex Positive Gaming's YouTube channel, who seems to be capable of covering it better. Right, let's go. Let's see. We'll open all this. Gaming on Linux is talking about horses quite a lot. We'll just open all these tabs. Okay, and we'll go to page 2. And I think probably don't have to open up anything. You can see my tabs are going crazy now though, because I opened a whole bunch of Gaming on Linux articles with each of them inherently now thinking about opening a whole bunch of Steam links, and it looks like a big black screen to you, but the tabs at the top of the browser are dancing around as it jumps from attention from one to the other. Which, yeah, perhaps a little bit more delay is needed in that case, but I don't think we really need to do that. Right. Let's go back here. I think everything on the second page here we've already talked about. I don't think we need to go back any further. Okay. So, like American Arcadian, it's all over the place as far as tabs go. Some of these are definitely older games. That's an MMO. The response to SNBox from FacePunch going open source has been overwhelmingly positive. Okay. Well, we'll leave that as an article. I don't think we need to go into details. Humble Choice for December 25 has 9 Souls, Like a Dragon, Gaiden, Streets of Rage 4, and more. These are going to be several of the links that we just opened up. Tactical shooter. I did not work on opening up the follow list links in a different way. That is still something for me to work on. So yeah, I could spend the next week or two pretty easily doing more tweaking and more programming to at best get half of my major macros out of UI Vision and still have half of them in UI Vision. Gaming Online says the RAM price and availability situation is going to worsen as Micron is pulling their crucial consumer business. Mesa 25.2.8 and 25.3.1 released for open source Linux graphics drivers. Some of this we may have already covered. Unreal Tournament 2004 gets revived by Old Unreal with approval from Epic Games. Yeah, we talked about this. Most of these stories, I guess, we probably have already talked about. Let's see. So there really may have only been one or two games that we hadn't talked about before, or maybe none. Another bundle. Yeah. Another group of games. Another bunch of games that feel like should have been talked about more. Steam is doing a sports fest. You can click on that. It's a very different color palette for Steam. And I would be shocked to have a ton of games here that are even on my wish list. Yeah. Linus Tech Tips loves this tape-to-tape game, and they play a lot of that. I'm actually surprised to see as many games on the list. On the wish list. Sports games are one of the several categories that I am least interested in. We're not seeing any Steam Deck games being listed here, which seems to be the growing trend, is that Valve is not really pushing you to have a category in your fests that are about the Steam Deck in particular. This is all in my fall list already. There's some things I could buy with the point shop. I would be using the last of my points there if I was to get those. And these are the things I'd be least interested in too, so that's going to be a no dog. Half-Life Legacy arrived December 12th, but you need Proton on Linux due to native Linux issues. Yeah, I wanted to play Beholder 1 at some point, I think. Go ahead and put Atomic Crops on the wish list. Godlike Burger. Yeah. It has got my mind spinning, certainly, if I could take the entire adult games and just strip all images from it and turn it into a text thing. Would that be good enough? Yeah. Apparently I already own this game. Must have got it for free. I think at this point a good third of the games I have I did get for free. That definitely seems like that is the move. Yeah, Valve's has been funding FEX to get x86 games on ARM Linux since the beginning of it. But yeah, that definitely feels like that might be the future. That being said, I don't think we're going to really run into a situation anytime in the next decade that games are going to run so well that a Steam Deck comes out running on an ARM chip. We'll see with the Steam Frame how well that works, but yeah. At some point, if we were going to make ARM chips that competed with x86 chips or AMD 64 chips, really, they would have to be huge compared to cell phone chips that use ARM architecture, and they would have to be very power hungry too, and still be efficient. Just feels like you're reinventing the wheel in a lot of cases. So this is interesting. Like a Dragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name is not tagged in the first few tags as having anything appropriate on it, but when I click the plus button, it opens this in the background to see that mature, no, sexual content is what's triggering it way down here. As far as the tag goes. So why does it work there? I must have misspelled hentai. That's the only thing I can think that would have happened, is I either misspelled the word nudity or I misspelled the word hentai and how it's spelled on the site, that it's not matching. Make it, put that on the follow list. Close that. So here's one of the newer stories. Again, I don't think we want to watch the trailer a third time. The question is, how long will it stay on these sites also? Is this game though really getting unfairly banned, or did it know it was going to be banned from Steam 2 years ago? It seems like it knew it was going to be banned from Steam 2 years ago. It was told in no uncertain terms it was going to be banned 2 years ago, which almost anything banned on Steam is also banned on Epic, just out of laziness on Epic's part. And it goes to show how the Epic Game Store is really not trying to be the place for developers where they are treated better. It's only really trying to be the place for the developers they like to have a slightly better experience. And it definitely isn't being a better place for gamers. Which, yeah, if I was running Epic Game Store, I'd say, yeah, we're going to have several games that were banned or censored on Steam available on our storefront to bring over that audience. Which Epic Game Store has the money from Fortnite to really pull that off. Way more than I think most other storefronts would have funding to do that. I think we talked about this and this, and we talked about that. This is the Sandbox. Oh, it's supposed to be Sandbox. That's how you pronounce it, isn't it? Let's see. No Players Online returns after an unfounded DMCA claim halted sales for nearly 3 weeks. Interesting. It's kind of a terrible name for a game. Also. Yeah. Put this here on the follow list. Call of the Sea. It's both on the follow list and the wish list. Take it off the follow list, I guess. I guess that does make me think I probably should have some kind of button for sequels and prequels. basically a more coming button to say, hey, we know this game has got a sequel in development that's going to potentially color our opinion as to whether we need to buy the game now or wait for a bundle later, or at least think about that. Right, well, that gets us around, I think. But we're not done yet. Interesting. There's now an AI warning notice browser plugin for itch.io as well as Steam. I'm sure it works just about the same. Which that plugin is exactly what I use to make my own adult content plugin. Right, and so we're at 3 hours and 11 minutes, so that is a great time to say we've done well and in this stream. If only we can maintain a run length about this long going forward, that would be great. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.